This goes back also to Ernest Hemingway. Hemingway, who was famous for the clarity in his language, once got asked, how do you achieve this clarity in your language? And Hemingway said, well, the first draft of anything is shit. That's a quote from Hemingway. You can find it. But then I rewrite every page up to 50 times or even 100 times, and that's how I achieve the clarity in my work. So instead of creating a beautiful object that doesn't get used, focus on a shitty first draft and use it. And then through the usage, iterate on it, understand what do we need to actually put this into practice. I hate it if teams work on weeks or months to create a beautiful journey map that once get presented and never get used again. Like we see that since 20 years, we know that this is not how we should be doing it. It's all about having impact and iterations.
It's part of the problem with improper use of AI is that it's very good at polishing off the edges of something and presenting it looks very professional and I think used incorrectly that could be a disaster, because you do want to encourage people. If all they're seeing is AI drafted stuff, you're like no, forget that. Let's go make something rough and horrible that doesn't look polished and hasn't been ran through a machine.
And there's research about it, because the more polished a prototype is, the more you get answers and feedback on details like colors and shape of a button or something. But you won't get feedback on the overall concept. And there's research on why that is. And one of my favorite biases is called the ugly baby bias. It's not a joke. You can find it. It's called the ugly baby bias. Now, imagine you have friends, a couple, and they get a new baby, and this baby is ugly, right? Nature happens. Like, fair enough. They present you this baby. Would you ever tell them that their baby is ugly? Well, unless you're very mean German, maybe not, right? But the idea
some cultures, maybe.
Welcome to the System of Shenanigans,
the podcast where we explore how the world's most interesting team organise themselves to get stuff done. I'm Chris Cooke from Atlassian Community.
And I'm Kit Friend from Accenture's Business Agility team.
And today we're joined by a wonderful guest, Mr. Stickdorn. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, pleasure, mate. Why don't you introduce yourselves to the lovely people who aren't familiar with your work?
Happy to. Marc Stickdorn, German, living in Austria, so we still have snow on our slopes here, and I can see people skiing down the mountain right now.
Awesome.
My background is service design. That's what I'm doing for the last 20 years or so. Published some books in service design. This is service design doing. This is service design thinking. Working on a new book since 5 years. Way behind my schedule, called This is Journey Management. I started a software company 15 years ago where we offer journey mapping as a software. So organizations can not only map, but actually manage their journeys. I think that will be part of our conversation today.
Nice.
If you're writing for 15 years, is it distressing now that you can just feed it into ChatGPT and it churns out the rest for you? Or are you're sticking with your guns? You're like, I started this, I'm going to finish it.
The thing is, it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. Like ChatGPT and Claude and so on is great if you have content and you can build on that. But if it's about really new stuff, you still need to write some parts of it at least.
It's good that the innovators still have a source of employment in 2026 at least. That's what I'm hearing.
And I have a source of beer every time Kit mentions AI. He owes me a beer, so this is good. Healthy tally.
There you go. We need a chalkboard up behind us for some things.
We have a guest appearance because I forgot to lock my door.
Oh, a guest on the show! A guest on the show.
Hi.
Long time friend.
Hello, Loki.
I cannot hear them.
Oh, sorry. You want the headphones on so you can hear them. Hang on.
This is actually a first. I don't know how we've avoided this on the show.
Hi. My name is Koroki.
Hi.
I did my daddy. The guy you're talking to right now is my daddy. Okay, funny.
Okay, go play with Mummy.
All right, Rocky.
Wait, he's working. He's helping. All right. Thank you for helping.
I need your help too. Let's go.
Can we get Loki to do Chris? Can we get Loki to do quick fire question rounds at the end for Mark? I think that'd be good.
Absolutely. He's yeah. He will confidently answer any question incorrectly, like ChatGPT.
We were being impressed by Mark's very high degree of qualification and actual expertise in a degree of donation, which is good. Or I was anyway. That's where I was at with things. Mark, I'm fascinated. Like it's still lots of appetite for journey mapping and things. I feel like it's one of those areas where it's just true, isn't it? It's just sensible, and yet you're like, hey, 2026. Why are we still having this discussion about adopting these things?
Well, I think a lot of that comes also from a misconception, because many people think that it's all about journey mapping, it's all about visualizing, but that was never the idea of it. Like, if you talk to designers who actually had an impact, they only used journey maps as a way to have impact in the organization. It was always a tool we were using, and not the final artifact we're delivering. And people start to understand that now and see it like, this is a living document. This is something we can use to drive decisions and really bring customer centricity into the organization.
Yeah, and for those of obviously Chris and I are both pros in this, but for anyone listening who's like, what's a journey map and things, like, could you give us a potted history, at least from your perspective, of like what are these things and where might people encounter them or encounter maybe the outcomes from them happening?
Yeah, so journey maps were there since a long time, or one specific part of a journey map, a service blueprint, which is, so let's start with the journey map. A journey map maps out the experience of an end user, of a customer. And if you not only focus on customer journeys, but employee journeys or citizen journeys, it could be the journey an employee goes through or a citizen goes through when they try to handle public services. Like, a movie tells you the story of a main actor as a sequence of scenes. A journey map tells you the story of your main actor, the customer, the citizen, as a sequence of steps. And it visualizes what the customer really is experiencing. That makes things that are usually intangible, like services, experience in general, suddenly tangible. Now, you can then add different layers of data to it. You can add measurements to it, metrics to understand the performance of it, or you can add processes to it. Like, what are we as an organization doing? Either that the customer is seeing, like above the so-called line of visibility, front stage, or backstage, that the customer doesn't even see all the stuff that are happening to make this experience work. Now, if you trace back where this comes from, one of the first journey maps, service blueprints, is from 1890. That was a Ritz Hotel in New York that already structured the experience and tried to understand what is happening front stage, backstage, following different artifacts through the journeys, like where does the order go to and so on. It's fascinating to delve into the history of it. But what we're seeing in the last, I say 10, 15 years, is increasingly not only using journey maps as a visual artifact we use in projects to align teams and so on, but really as a tool that is driving decision-making in the organization. So again, you add different layers to it, layers of what are pain points, maybe connected to systems of continuous qualitative research. Think of where does your complaints go end in, or the call center reports you get on a monthly basis. And you crawl through and say, these are the pain points people currently care about. These are the pain points that have a financial impact on the organization because it increases how many calls we got in the call center, or it increases the length of backstage processes and so on. And then you can use these really for decision making continuously. Like, what should we focus on this month, this quarter, this year?
Really fascinating. I didn't know the history of them that far back with things, and it does kind of feel natural that they might come from a sector like hospitality, right? And that it's all about curating that experience. And I guess the quintessential place that people experience maybe lack of hospitality now is that classic call center sort of call up and there's something wrong with my thing. Really, really interesting. And
I often
I
like
guess
to differentiate between transactional services or parts of services and rather emotional ones. The transactional is what we can automate, where AI can take over and we don't care. Let the robots do the transactional stuff, so we don't have to care about that. But where we need to double down on is any emotional services or parts of services we have, interactions between people. And just as you say, tourism, travel industry, of course, is focusing on that forever.
Yeah, it reminds me actually. I might have told Chris before. There's an amazing. I do mixed martial arts, and there's a really good MMA shop near me in Brisbane. And I love it because you walk in and everyone looks like you might expect as a stereotype of sort of heavily tattooed MMA fighter, and you might feel a bit. You might get an impression for that going in. You go in and ask for some service. I've never received more thorough, personalised, tailored service in my life around things. Very specific and niche. Like it's all about shin height and sort of like the give in a particular kind of pad or something. But really, for me, does epitomise that thing, and exactly where I didn't want like an AI. Right, there's certain contexts where you do want that kind of emotional connection around things as well. Yeah. And like any sort of really great examples you've seen, kind of ones that you worked on and were proud of, or like, or you think like, oh, I wish I'd worked on that. That's like, there's a beautiful experience that's been created there.
I think it's one of the downsides of my job. You tend to see failures everywhere, and it's really painful. Like you're traveling and you see all these misalignments. Right? Like the most common one is that different departments take care of or are responsible for different steps in the journey. And any handover between these departments is a moment of failure for a customer. Because as a customer, I don't care if I'm talking to marketing, sales, or IT when I suddenly call the hotline. And it really feels like a different company. It feels like they don't want me as a customer sometimes. And these moments where it breaks or where there's lots of waiting time, because often process charts don't track waiting time for the customer. It's one of the most important steps in a customer journey, however. How long does something wait? How long does something take for me? So, yes, it's a bit painful because you walk through the world and you see all these crap.
I judge most of these companies by their waiting time music, because look, if you're calling a British company for customer service, you're going to be waiting more than 20 minutes. So they might at least give us good music so we can enjoy the experience.
It reminds me of that. I don't know if either of you read Pattern Recognition by William Gibson, but it's I've forgotten that the main character is like a brand consultant, but she's like so allergic to terrible design and terrible branding. She has to like sand the logos off of her buttons and kind of like it's like it's exactly as Mark describes. She's so attuned to providing advice, she has to sort of sanitize the stuff around her, because it's like otherwise you're always problem solving, right? You're looking at things and going like, I design that a little bit better. Oh, you round things down.
So in preparation for this episode, I think we discovered that Mark has actually used a product that Kit worked on. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
This is a lovely
Kit, you were working on the Sky team, right? We'll talk about that a bit.
So I'll give a bit of context with things. So I think this is a public case study. We're talking about it anyway. It was a positive experience. So I had the great privilege of working with one of our clients, Sky, in the UK on the launch of the SkyX product. And Mark happens to be based in Austria now around things. And SkyX was I think a nice hypothesis. I'm interested how it feels. What would be 5 years after launch now around things, to take the bones of Sky's on-demand TV services and create something a bit more kind of nimble and flexible in a local market. And they picked Austria and specifically Vienna because it was a really good petri dish. It was a place where you could have like a high concentration of population, good broadband, and to just see how it went with things. So I remember it as a lovely collaboration of people. But before I ask Mark whether we've ruined it a few years later, which is like, I'll say the nice thing first, which is like, I remember working with Marcus, and one of the problems we had was, and actually you'll hopefully be able to tell us the inside kind of view of this, Mark, as a German in Austria. So we were really worried about making the language Austrian German specifically, so that the local audience like didn't go like what, and it just be just slightly off. It's like it's a little bit like I guess if you were designing a Scottish TV service and you wouldn't want like someone like me designing the UI. Oh, this is going to go downhill very quickly, sort of things. But well, we had like Marcus, who was an ex-advertising guy, who looked I loved him to bits. I'll find his kind of surname a little bit because it passes me by. But he was like he looked like someone who like had a passionate outdoor lifestyle. He wore like big fishing jumpers and things, and he had to manually translate about 600 labels into Austrian German, and it was I really appreciated it because it was like. Yeah. So like 80% of them were fine. Like you could use German. 20% he was like, that makes no sense. Like we can't put this out. Like, and it was that passion that Mark's been talking around like that detection of like, oh, that would be terrible. Like that just won't make sense to a customer and things. So I had lots of fun making it. Do you like using it, Mark? Is it showing its age okay?
I have to blow your hypothesis there, but that's because I'm German living in Austria, and all my devices are in English, so I really don't care about the language. Sorry.
What? You're not using the functionality that my team built? That's terrible. Well, there we go. But thank goodness we made it work in English still.
I love the service in general. It's like almost on demand, right? It's a month-to-month payment thing, and if they are great football games and I want to watch them, then I just buy it for a month, watch it, and then I can cancel again. So I'm one of those customers that probably signs up and cancels twice a year.
I think it was made for you. There you go. I made a product someone's still using, Chris.
There you go.
That's amazing. That's cool. I wonder if has it been the other way around? Have you had a chance to play with Marc's toolkit?
No, I haven't actually. That would have been a really good bit of preparation to do. Maybe let's cut this. Give me 10 minutes, and I'll come back and do.
Well, why don't you explain it though, Marc? If Kit hasn't had a chance to play with it,
Well,
what does Smaply do?
15 years ago, we started Smaply, a software to create and manage journey maps. And at that time, like 15 years ago, we were the first. Like there was no market for it, right? There was no other tool out there. And what we're talking about hypothesis, what we started 15 years ago was when I was working with large companies running service design, I saw two patterns. Either they were using design tools. At that time, it was like InDesign and stuff like that, creating beautiful artifacts that no one ever touches again. Like they became static, and only this one designer was able to change it. So nowadays you would think of Figma maybe or something like that, where only the design team is actually able to change it. The other pattern was I saw organizations use horrible tools to create journey maps like PowerPoint and Excel and so on. But these became living objects because they were accessible and everyone in the organization was able to contribute to it. And that was the basic starting point for us. Let's combine this. Let's create a tool where it's really made for journey mapping and later journey management, but accessible for everyone. That is so easy to use that everyone in the organization can just sign up and use it, and you can invite anyone to it. Now, a couple of years later, I think it was 2016, we launched the next version, which then included like data integration. So you can pull in data from spreadsheet, connect it to Jira, so you can see also decisions you made. Are they follow up? What is the status of these user stories you agreed on? You were able to link journeys into each other, so you can build a whole hierarchy of maps. And now, fast forward, that's where we are today, where organizations build entire hierarchies of journey maps. High-level maps, think of it in maps in geography, where you might have a continent. You don't see a lot of details, but you get a good overview of anything you're offering, all the experiences people have of all the products. And then you can zoom into a different country, zoom into a city. The more you zoom in, the more details you see. And just like that, you're connecting journeys into each other. So you can zoom from a life cycle view all the way to this very detailed step, which might be important for the experience. And that's why you go very detailed in this little episode. And then you connect it with different data and use it for continuous decision making. So you always focus on those pain points and unmet needs and opportunities that have the most impact on customer experience, the best impact for the business outcome.
I can confirm, having not tried it before, I've just made a journey map for a awkward German in Austria who chooses to do English language versions of apps, and it's really good. I was able to make a basic journey map in like a minute whilst you were explaining it, Mark. So yeah, it looks really neat. It does actually, going through the things, like, it does speak to me that like humans love a visual to kind of like communicate and orient around. There's something about like show me that always split through things. And we were teaching a Scrum Master course last week actually, and it was funny because we had an exercise that's shared across a couple of courses, and there's a secret to doing it really well. And a student had been on both courses, and I was like, so Josh will be able to coach the team in how to do this. Could Josh do it? No, he could not. And he, a really nice guy, but he talked at the team for like 8 minutes explaining this like secret method, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we understand." They went and did it, completely misinterpreted the whole thing. But the moment that he showed them with a drawing and things, they were like, "Oh, okay." Yeah, and I feel like, whether it's a journey map or other visual device, that power of bringing humans together, assuming they're fortunate enough to have their site, is incredible, right?
I absolutely agree. It's often one of the initial reasons why people start using a journey map. Because if you have 5 people around the table talking about a service or an experience, because it's not tangible, the chances are high that everyone got their own story in their head. We're lacking what's called in design theory a boundary object, like an object that really brings everyone together. If we create a physical object, you can put the physical objects on the table, everyone knows exactly what we're talking about. But with experiences, with services, because they're intangible, we are lacking this. And a journey map is just this boundary object that allows everyone to make sure they talk about the same thing. A way to communicate easier with each other and much faster, because you can point towards things, and if it's tangible, it becomes designable.
And I'm looking at Smap doing things, Mark, so like journey map versus like story map versus like these other things. There's a whole family of kind of similar devices or techniques, right? Like, how would you guide people on which of these practices or methods to use depending on their context?
Well, a journey map for me is an umbrella term. And a journey map always means like there is a main actor and you follow this main actor through an experience. It can happen on different Zoom levels, like a high level, think of signing up, like you're buying a house and you're entering a mortgage contract with a bank. It's a 30-year-long journey, right? A painful journey sometimes. And then from this 30 years, you can zoom in all the way down to this 1 minute when you're sitting in the office and signing the mortgage contract. One signature that actually defines the next 30 years of like your financials. It's quite an important moment, right? So we need to switch between these high level moments and these very detailed moments that become really important for your journey. Now, what you can do with all of these tools is you can switch to different Zoom levels. You can switch to different moment in time. You can look at how is the experience right now, an as is journey, a current state journey, and envision the future. How should this be after this project? How should it be in innovation horizon 1, 2, 3? What is the vision for it in 10 years? So you have different future state journeys or to be journeys, and sometimes you can combine them with each other. And then you can add different layers of data to it. So a user story map, for example, adds different release plannings into your customer journey, where I say, well, in the next release, these are the user stories we want to add from our development backlog. If we are ready and if we release it, this is the experience we are anticipating. The next release will have these user stories, and we anticipating the follower experience then. Our service blueprint looks at what are the internal processes, customer facing or backstage or even third party that you tie in. So you look more at how does this work? So all of these always have the journey and the different steps someone goes through as a baseline, but then you can add different data according to what you try to achieve.
Simple as that, Chris, right? Just go use them, right? Yeah. Have you used any of these when you've been building your business empires, Chris?
Me, no. I was too busy. I am not an attention to detail man, so I'll put it that way. So I left it to the product team.
Also laudable, right? No, your expertise, right? Things. Yeah, I find it really interesting, and I've got so many questions like this, but I'm probably this one. I guess
I want to comment on that, because what you're saying is something very common, right? We use different tools, we use different language in different parts of the organization, in different organizational silos. Different organization silos care about different things. They measure success differently. So you have certain KPIs you care about, where like marketing might care about website visits, sales might care about how much revenue you bring in. And how do you bring all of this together? And this is exactly where journey management come into play, where you use a consistent system, one source of truth that is connecting the different silos with each other on different flight levels. So those who don't care about details, they get a high level view of it, but they see, how does my work contribute to the overall goal? What is the overall goal? Where are the big pain points, the big visionary opportunities we're pursuing? And then it goes all the way down to very detailed, tactical, operational decisions, where teams can take these decisions, but through a system of journey maps, they become transparent. So in an organization, you see what are the different teams working on and how does this contribute to each other, or you can anticipate conflicts, because frankly, the customer experience team is just managing a fraction of all the projects that impact customer experience. Most customer experience comes from anywhere in the organization, like IT launching a new software, legal, think about GDPR introduction in Europe and what kind of impact that had on the experience. And often we don't know what's going on. So this hierarchy of maps where you bring in different teams and you bring in transparency in the organization just allows you to understand, how does my work contribute to it? And is there anything I should be aware of?
When you're setting up that interaction between teams and areas, let's say you have an imaginary colleague, let's call him Christopher Crock, and like he's in an area and he's like, okay, all I do is sales and things. How do you, whose role, or how do you get it so that that imaginary person doesn't just leave the asset on the side and go, the designers look after that, is to do with the pretty stuff, and actually embeds that in their work? And it might be the sales team, or it might be the delivery team going like, leave us alone with your pretty buttons. I'm about doing the engineering. Like, how do you build that muscle in?
Think about what is relevant to them. If a journey map doesn't include relevant data for them, they will react just as you explained. Like, okay, interesting, but you take care of it. I don't care. And what they actually say, what is the subtext I am hearing when someone tells me that, is this map does not include relevant data for me. So how can you make a map relevant to, let's say, two completely different teams in an organization? Let's say you want to get together the legal team with the IT folks. Well, what does legal care about? Maybe you think of risk and policies and stuff like that. All stuff that is great to add as information layer to a journey map. And how do you, what does IT care about? Well, different systems. Well, track that. Like, what are we using in the different steps? Which systems are included? And suddenly you can see, where does the cookie policy get agreement on? From which moment on do we actually use cookies? Is this aligned or not? Suddenly they have a boundary object that connects both with each other. They can see relevant information for them, but they can use it also to translate between different fields of work. So the first step is always understand what people care about and then include this on the map.
And is this changing with the word that I'm not allowed to say? Otherwise, I Chris a bit. So, because when I think about this, so yes, it's great to do that. It's also a pain to get different humans with different concerns communicating. And Atlassian calls this their teamwork graph. Other vendors have different kind of terms and things. But this idea that, hey, all your stuff is in the system somewhere. When you come in with your specific need, say refining a user story in sprint planning, you can then use the magic in robots to yank in the knowledge and go like, hey, the GDPR journey, the bit of data that I need from things there. Is it important that the person knows that it's coming from a journey map, or is it okay that the robots are yanking that stuff down?
Well, we see AI accelerating everything. I think it's great, and it's great that robots are taking over tedious tasks that we don't care about. But in the end, someone needs to be responsible for it. And the one who's responsible for it is either who allows the robot to do whatever decision they take, but then they're not really in control of it. Or robots help you with making better and faster decisions. And that's rather my view, what I'd like to do. Like, yes, I would love to have access to all the information. I would love to have recommendations. And if there are non-important decisions, fair enough, if robots take it. But be aware that if you allowed an agent to take a decision on your behalf, you are still responsible for it. So for the important decisions, I want to be in charge, because in the end, it's my decision.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And so I wrote an article, or co-wrote an article with Marianne Duncan, one of my design colleagues a while back, who's a service designer, and she was lamenting the fact that there's no design role in the Scrum Guide, right? The designer is left out. The people who have this role, and I mean designer in the broadest sense of things. Like how would you say that typically works best in a team context? Like, do you have a designer assigned for a delivery area? Do they float, or don't know? Does it mix up?
No, there's so many levels to this question, and I'm going to start with a very broad one. I think designers lack often one skill, and that is speaking the language of the organization. Like, often I hear designers talking about, well, we need a seat at the boardroom. But then if they talk, they speak design language, and they care about customer experience KPIs, like Net Promoter Scores, CSAT, customer engagement scores, what have you. Honestly, most people in an organization don't care about this. What most people in a commercial context care about are things like churn, retention, revenue growth, stuff like this. So what we need to do is translate our work into what the organization cares about. And that might be in a commercial context, these things I just mentioned. That might be in public services, costs, or how many people you can help with. That might be in an NGO and a care journey, how much positive impact you have on people, and whatever the organization care about and measures. And we need to be able to speak this language. And if we translate our work and show how our work contributes to overall goals, then people start to get interested in. Now, if we focus on more details there, there's also one general thing we should avoid are handoffs in projects. And where I see a classic breaking point is if there is a clear split between design and delivery, or even worse, a split between research, design, and delivery. Like if there's a team who's doing research, then throwing a research report over the fence, hoping that designers understand whatever they wrote, or what the robots wrote, and create a solution, throw that over the fence to development with here's a blueprint, just make it real. Or even worse with here are 5 user stories, that's all you need to care about. Then
let me guess, I predict this will go really well.
Yes, exactly, right. So you get what Peter Drucker called the greatest tragedy in business. You have a great solution for the wrong problem. And that is happening very often. So if you ask me, should a designer be part of the entire process? Yes, if possible. Does it need to be a designer? I don't know. But what we need to care about is to keep what we call the chain of empathy. There need to be someone part of the entire project part of the research, seeing with their own eyes what people are failing with, what they're struggling is, what is the issue, throughout the design process, making sure the fix is actually for this pain point or the solution is exactly for this unmet need. But then also in development, making sure whatever we deliver in the end is actually what should be fixing a pain point or following an unmet need. And I think designers are especially well trained to be a translator between different parts of the organization. But design in the end is a team sport, and you need loads of different expertise on the design team.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So I just dissed the Scrum guide, so let's say a nice thing about them as well. But like, I like the notion in Scrum that things are accountabilities, not roles, and it'd be interesting to consider design and the sorts of ways that you define it as an accountability. And it's like, it doesn't need to be someone with designer on their name badge, as long as you've got someone in the team who is holding that kind of sense of like, what's it actually like for the people who are using things close to the way that they're building them around stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So any other questions? Jump in, Chris, when you've got some bits as well. I guess that the next one that springs to mind, Mark, is like, it's very easy for us to run away and create the most amazing plan. And in your universe, that plan takes the form of a journey map, and other people have other kind of plans they run away with. How do you stop the team spending months creating the most beautiful journey map and then delivering something that the humans don't actually want at the end of it?
Don't make it pretty, make it shitty. We often talk about a really important concept in design called the shitty first draft. And the shitty first draft, it's an academic concept, right? There are books about it. There are research papers about it. There's a chapter in our book about that stuff. It frees people from perfection. Like, no one can judge an idea and say, like, is this a really good idea just from an idea? Because every idea in the beginning is just a shitty first draft. And then we need to work on this idea. We need to improve it. This goes back also to Ernest Hemingway. Hemingway, who was famous for the clarity in his language, once got asked, how do you achieve this clarity in your language? And Hemingway said, well, the first draft of anything is shit. That's a quote from Hemingway. You can find it. But then I rewrite every page up to 50 times or even 100 times, and that's how I achieve the clarity in my work. So instead of creating a beautiful object that doesn't get used, focus on a shitty first draft and use it. And then through the usage, iterate on it, understand what do we need to actually put this into practice. I hate it if teams work on weeks or months to create a beautiful journey map that once get presented and never get used again. Like we see that since 20 years. We know that this is not how we should be doing it. It's all about having impact and iterations.
I first heard of this concept from will.i.am of the Black Eyed Peas. He was giving a keynote at Atlassian event in Barcelona, I think. And this was his thing. Is like, especially imagine you get picked up by a record contract. It's a big deal. There's lots of pressure. There's lots of money. And he just decided to stay true to himself in his writing process. And so he was just, go for that shitty first draft, or just, I don't know, a hummable version. He was saying he was just like humming and making noises. And he even shared like a very early version of Where Is the Love with him just like singing the bits very poorly. And he's like, but it just helps inspire the ideas and keeps people moving and gives people also the confidence to be like, no idea's a bad idea. This is all rough and ready. Keep going. And I do worry, actually. I'll buy you a beer for this, Kit, but it's part of the problem with improper use of AI is that it's very good at polishing off the edges of something and presenting it looks very professional, and I think used incorrectly that could be a disaster, because you do want to encourage people. If all they're seeing is AI drafted stuff, you're like, no, forget that. Let's go make something rough and horrible that doesn't look polished and hasn't been ran through a machine.
And there's research about it, because the more polished a prototype is, the more you get answers and feedback on details, like colors and shape of a button or something. But you won't get feedback on the overall concept. And there's research on why that is. And one of my favorite biases is called the ugly baby bias. It's not a joke. You can find it. It's called the ugly baby bias. Now, imagine you have friends, a couple, and they get a new baby, and this baby is ugly, right? Nature happens, like, fair enough. They present you this baby. Would you ever tell them that their baby is ugly? Well, unless you're very mean German, maybe not, right? But the idea
Some cultures, maybe.
yeah, well, I know there are some people, but I think the majority wouldn't do that. Now, the thing is, if we don't tell people the truth, because let's translate it to our work. If you create something, you create a prototype of this new thing, and you spend weeks, months in working on that, it looks polished, it looks great, and you present it to someone, most people won't give you honest feedback because of the ugly baby bias. So you get detailed feedback. If you instead share a shitty first draft, which looks rough, and you see like not much work went into it, you get feedback on the bigger concepts. So the fidelity of a prototype actually talks to different layers of feedback, and that is something we can use strategically. So even if you have a polished concept ready to launch, sometimes we intentionally create a shitty first draft version which looks shitty, which looks like we're not emotionally attached to it, to avoid the ugly baby bias and get feedback on the general concept.
Keep things as the wireframe. Even if you don't need two of things, right? I think I've been actually, since one of our episodes in the last series, I've been playing more with vibe coding tools like Lovable. I can definitely relate to what you're saying, Mark. I do think they can be really powerful in getting you to a prototype that you can get feedback on really quickly. But yeah, you have to know where to stop, even with the prototype, like let alone with the real kind of polished product and things.
Yeah, or at least like work on different levels. Like even if you have a polished version, be aware of this bias. So create a version that looks unpolished just to get the big feedback, the general feedback on it.
Do you think there should be a make it shit button in vibe coding tools?
I would love that.
Like a lo-fi switch for kind
of well, I like the idea of like a shittiness scale. You can like say like this should look like crap, or this should look polished. Maybe we call it rather the fidelity scale, but I would love that.
I don't know. I think if you polish it too much, it loses the joy of the scale. You can make it like a sound when you put it down to the bottom of the scale. Right?
No, but I've applied this with all sorts, especially like when I was, founder, CEO of a company. Like, if I spoke with too much confidence and gravitas, like that's the end of the meeting. Everyone just goes, "Yep, sounds good," and you're like, "Oh, that's not why I raised the topic." So I ended up just like, making it sound like I hadn't thought about the thing a lot. I'd be like, I just had an idea. What do you guys think? Right? Like pretend it's a less polished first draft than it truly was in my mind. Because otherwise, there's nothing worse than me showing up with confidence being like, all right, guys, I think this. Any other suggestions? Everyone's like, no, sounds like you've put a lot of effort in. So cool. We'll leave it there.
And since we talked about journey maps earlier, that's also why like you don't have this degree of fidelity in it, but you can filter the data on a map and use that as a kind of degree of fidelity. Like often people create a journey map that is packed with data, and we're just overwhelming our audience with that. So to make a map relevant, it needs to be perceivable, it needs to be accessible, but relevant enough to them. So one trick is you scale down the amount of information on your map. You use filters to show like what is relevant to them and just give them enough context to understand it. And if they get it, if they're interested, then you can add layer after layer. So we can use a map also to do research and ask folks, like, what do you think are the pain points? And then you can reveal the research you've done with folks. Say, like, this this is what actually the research looked like. So what could be solutions for it? And then people can ideate around that. And only then you reveal the next layer and so on.
That makes a lot of sense. But we're hearing a lot of best practice, and I really would be entertained to hear some epic failures that you guys have experienced over the years.
It's our favorite topic. What are you going to learn from, right? Not the successes.
Oh, there's so many. Which area would you like to have?
Any preferences, Kit?
I always like the messiest first. Like I want one with a real, like, you launched it, you'd spent 6 months, 6 years making the thing. And it was a disaster. Evidently, my careful translation with Marcus into Austrian German was not well prioritized for a section of the audience. What's your worst splash zone from a service design decision?
Well, I share something from my own company, from Smaply, and this is something we coined at some point a pool feature. And a pool feature is if you book a holiday, you probably at some point choose a hotel, and people always choose the hotel with the nicest pools, even though you don't use them. But they look great, they sound good, so you want to have this pool. So we did a pool feature, and that was in 2016, I think. We created a PowerPoint export for journey maps, which was great for a very small audience. But we thought the audience would be much bigger, because what it allowed you to do is from a journey map immediately create a PowerPoint presentation that is presentable. Great. People loved it. But then if we looked into the user statistics, hardly anybody was using it. And the reason for it is the moment you pressed the button and created a PowerPoint presentation out of your journey map, it became static and outdated. So what it led to often is people presented a version of the map in the PowerPoint slides, which was outdated. So we realized people are not using that much actually as we intended to. But it was a good insight. It was a cool feature. That was one of the reasons people chose the tool.
It's funny. I drew a very similar map for an article with Unito back in 2020, and it hasn't got any better. It's the hidden cost of exporting data, and I guess we're still talking about data, right, in a journey map. But I find it bizarre in that even though from the moment you hit export, what Mark's saying is precisely true, right? The inaccuracy of the data just plummets or skyrockets depending on your kind of graph with things. I find the weird thing is that the humans, especially as you go through the management layers, add some mythical value to it, even as they enhance it in isolation. So it's like, as you tot up the data and put things in, even though you've now diverged at some point in history between reality and things there, people go, oh yeah, this is now the presentation and the things, even though you're just making it worse. Every second, every edit, everything you make, doesn't matter whether it's journey mapping, reporting, planning, anything like that. It's chronic, right?
It is.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, Mark, but the biggest realization I had was listening to call records from call centers. We started by talking about call centers, and I feel like call centers are the most wonderfully hideous place to learn around your design mistakes and things, because they're where the shit really hits the fan in our scale of. We've been talking that there is different kinds of poop throughout the episode, and I feel when you hear some people trying to support some real users using some mixture of the product that you built, the instructions that you said to use it, and the scripts you said to support it, you find out whether you've really built something that works for humans, overall with things. And it's deeply humbling is the only way I can explain it from seeing into things.
It is, and it's one of the most important sources you can use when you talk about customer experience. It's apps and anyone working in frontline stuff, be it in a call center, be it on a shop floor in sales, they are the true experts because they really know what is going on in the customer's life. And if you look at organization, that's often underused. It's undervalued in an organization, and for me, it's one of the great sources, especially for qualitative research data in a journey map, anecdotal data. And when I work with large organizations, I often realize that higher management never use their own products. They never use their own services because they have people for doing that. So what I like to do is take them on a service safari. Like, you probably know this crappy TV show Undercover Boss, right? We don't do the fake mustache thing, but just let them experience a service. Like, how is it for you if you bring your car yourself to a service? How is it to arrange a date for it and so on? But then we also switch side because most customer pain points are rooted in employee pain points. Like the example you just gave, when you call a call center and an agent tells you, I'm sorry, the system doesn't allow me to do this. It's a pain point for both sides. And actually, to fix the customer pain point, we need to fix the employee pain points. So what we love to do is to do research with folks on the front line. And if we look at call center agents, the first thing I take a look at is at their workspace and all the little sticky notes they have around their screens. Because all of these are design flaws. Like, you might have the phone number from this one person in accounting. And when you ask, like, hey, what's the story here? They say, well, the system doesn't allow me to do this or that. So I have a friend in accounting. If I call that person, then we can resolve it quickly, and I don't need to go through all this tedious process here. You sometimes see passwords there, and you ask, what's the story about this password? Well, that's a different system. We all use the same password to log in. That's no joke, that's happening. Because that's the only way to access the data in this system. And we all use the same. So all of these are design flaws that in the end manifest as a customer experience issue, but actually are way earlier employee pain points. So service design is not only for customer experience, but one of the big growing fields in service design is people experience, employee experience.
Yeah. XP talks about the importance of like having an on-site customer as a kind of principle. And obviously the ideal is you literally have one of your customers sat there, but in the absence of that, like having your product people sourced from that bit of the world, I feel like is a hidden treasure that or cheat code that no one ever does. And it's like I've taught, well, it must be hundreds of product owner courses now. When you talk about like where do you get your product people from, and you go like, how many of you have a product person who's from your customer service team who's been like an agent? And there's this horrible silence where the cogs kind of were, and people are like, oh, we could just have someone who's had to support our actual customers and therefore can proxy for them really well, rather than like a business person trying to gain empathy. And it's like, or you can train the customer service agent in the business skills way easier than you can train the business person in being that close to their customers. Is my experience over and over.
Yes, I agree. It's such an interesting topic. There is a term that I absolutely love. When in the design process, you bring in real customers to give you feedback on your research, your prototype, and so on. And this term is adults. So bringing in real customers are often called adults because they really know what is going on and they can give you honest feedback. I love that.
Yeah. And I can't remember exactly which service it was, so I won't mention the name, but one of the food delivery services, they've got a policy where their product team are drivers once a month for things like, so they force it. And I think Lean, they call this the Gemba walk, right? But it's I really like the idea that you might force that kind of getting back on the shop floor thing, not as like a random TV show quirk, but actually just as part of the normal working pattern. And it must be so cheap. Like rather than commissioning massive amounts of research and things, which you should do as well. There's huge value to research and longitudinal studies and surveys and things. But like, I feel a good cheat is surely just to force your people close to the people that they say that they're serving.
And many companies are doing it. Certainly not enough, but yes, I totally agree.
I mean, that is the most hilarious aspect of Undercover Boss is how out of touch the CEO often is with his customers and his employees. And he's walking around being like, I had no idea it was like this. You're like, why did it take a TV show for you to be curious how your company's actually run?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? And so you own a product, right, Mark? With things like, how do you stay close to the designers? So the designers are your customers, presumably, right? So you're trying to stay both close to them and close to the customers that they're trying to stay close to, so that you can keep it real.
So one of the tricks is everyone does support, and like I do with support. I jump on calls. I take tickets on a daily basis. And I expect that maybe not from like a back-end developer, but also like they jump on customer calls, maybe together with us then. And that really brings the whole team closer to the customer. And it keeps your foot on the ground because you hear the daily struggles people have with your product. And or the opposite, right? You hear the struggles they have and how your product actually enables them and helps them lift up. So it just brings us all closer to the customer. I think that is really, really important.
Mm. I feel like it's we were talking last week about the practices in SAFe of like big room planning, where you get everyone together and do things. And my enduring feeling is that in the weird world we live in now with all our work, you can probably keep the beginning of that event where you get people aligned around the vision. You can probably scrap the planning bit because no one likes it anyway and does things. But you need to keep together the intentional togetherness at the end for where you can swap those stories and build that connection and do the like, oh, did you see how people were doing this thing? And like create that kind of like bonding around things. You can't replace it. It's got to have that presence around things.
Well, in the end, it's a why, hey? Why are we doing this? Why do we focus on this now?
Yeah. And so we heard one of your failure stories around things from your organization. Any favorite failures that you've seen in customer service design terms, this whole kind of family of stuff from other organizations? Feel free to name and shame them where it's just us and thousands of viewers.
Well, I think the classic one is this planning and this creating visions and investing a lot into blueprints and really crafting out the detail, and then it never gets done because it was misaligned with the vision of the organization, or they never talked to legal if it was allowed to do, or they never talked to IT if it was feasible to do. So again, this alignment within the different silos of the organization is so important, and there are just so many stories where companies or teams didn't check with what they are doing with the reality of many others, and then it's doomed to fail.
Yeah, I think
I'm not going to name a specific one here.
We'll check here in a minute.
I have a friend that works on a big development project here in Thailand, and it was amazing because he's worked for some of the biggest companies. I can't give away too much because there's only 4 big companies in Thailand, so it's fairly easy to guess which one. But his criteria for when accepting a job with a company was incredible. He just wanted to know, like, okay, will I be in head office or a satellite office? And all of these were like deal breakers for him. If it was not in head office, he'd say no, because then he'd know that he'd be spending loads of time working on a project that ultimately someone else would come from a different office and have a different opinion on. And so he'd ask, like, do I have a budget authority and and want to know the hierarchy. And once he went through this criteria, he'd say yes to the job because he's like, cool, then I think there's a chance we can actually complete this project. And if not, he just knew enough to be like, it won't work. I will waste my time on it, and then someone else with more budget or authority will come along and distract us all and pull my key people before we finish, and it'll be a nightmare. And having never worked for a company that big, it just blew my mind. But he'd just learned how to quickly work out whether a project was going to succeed or not.
I would add another criteria to it, and that is, can I stop a project? Because in many cases, like, people plan projects up front, and even though halfway through, you know, this is not going to work. This is a waste of money, time, resources. You don't stop it because there's a plan for it. There's budget aligned to it. So we do it and we launch it. And we just hope that someone likes it in the end. And that is like, I think often we have to turn our language, coming back to the initial topic of how important it is to speak the language. What we are doing in design is we often work on de-risking projects. We're working on minimizing the risk of failure. But we can only do that if we are allowed to stop a project. And in many cases, one of the root problems is too early we think of big decisions that we need to stick with. Like these big decisions to do this one project and then we just follow on with it. Instead, we should do a sequence of smaller decisions. Say, let's invest a bit of research and explore these 3 options. Let's do a bit of prototyping and try those 5 options and see which one of them flies. And then take a decision based on data. And what we're doing is really we're de-risking, we're minimizing risk for an organization.
It's a really brave company that's prepared to cancel stuff though, right? I find people really develop a deep attachment to things. And it's like, my idea must have been great. I was just sense checking. Oh, sorry, Mark, go.
No, sorry, but that is exactly the point. It's my idea. It's my precious idea, right? That if you just have one idea, that is the problem. That exactly is the problem. If you focus, if you're so attached emotionally to something because you invested a lot of time, you will always find reasons why your initial decision was so good to do this. There's a lot of psychology research about it, right? We're not gonna change or challenge our previous decisions, and that's why we should avoid that. And instead of having this one big decision, not get emotionally attached too early to one solution, but get a little bit attached to 5 of them, so we can actually kill those on the go and then come up with a better decision on which one actually works in the end.
Yeah, and the key there is the choice architecture, right? Like if you just have a binary succeed or fail, then okay, I guess we're all in on this idea then. Like, if you make it sound like the last lifeboat off the Titanic, then people are going to desperately cling to it, even if they don't think it's the best boat they've ever built.
It'd be interesting if in our new wonderful AI-powered world, that's 3 beers now, I think, for Chris, around things. It'd be interesting if we could sort of mimic the process of evolution, where every now and again you just get a random mutation in the products. So, like, because I think in many ways the problem is like all the mutations are planned, right, in typical products. It'd be great if suddenly all the text becomes bright pink on Mondays, and you see what that does to the product, right? And like
it's creating the X-Men of product ideas. Just slight mutants.
I did find a good stat on this though, Chris. So like the sources are slightly contentious, but what percentage of SaaS product features do you think are never used in a fairly recentish study-ish? 2019 was the last one I could find, but I think it's probably still true.
In my experience, it's huge. I've spoken to so many teams in the last 3 years who are so proud of their features, and when I ask them that, firstly, they don't know. Right? When I ask their customers, they're like, what? What's that feature? And you talk it through, they're like, oh, that sounds really exciting. Where would I find that? And you're like, yeah, they haven't found it. I'd a guess 70%.
I would even
it's not for. Yeah,
wow.
It's like depending on the source. I found someone criticizing the original standard stat on it, but the last one I could find is worse. 80% in the last Pendo report I could find, and like. When I talk about this with teams, I'm always like, just imagine all those buttons at the top of basically any tool. I always pick Excel for some reason. Like all those buttons you never press. Like you press save and bold like 99.9% of the time, right? All those random other ones as users.
There's nothing worse than like you're struggling to do something and then you click like there's a I button and it doesn't come up with an immediate pop-up, but it takes you to a documentation page which is hundreds of pages long and loading, and you're like immediately close that and you're like, no, I don't have time for this. I'm not going to be finding out how to do that product.
I think this is the real danger that we're going to have when we democratize the ability to design and build solutions everywhere. We'll get loads of things that should really never be built, like, and particularly have like real implications on people way of making. So at the moment, this week, everyone's talking about how Jira will be replaced with AI tools and things, and I'm like, I feel anyone writing that really fails to appreciate the value of not having the ability to make exactly what you want the whole time, right? And because like if I could count the number, give me 100 requests that I fielded as a Jira admin, 85% of them I refused because they were terrible ideas. Not because I couldn't do them, but because I knew what that would do to a team that you give that tool. And now people are just going to be able to do them, right? They're going to be able to force every team to set a milestone due date for the task that you gave them this morning by the end, and make everything into bananas. I don't know what's it going to be. It's going to be terrible.
There's a deeper philosophical question here that, like, if you're living in an afterlife where everyone gets their version of heaven, would that not be hell? If you're walking around the village and everyone had made everything they wanted come to existence, you'd be like, oh, this is too much. I can't stand this.
It reminds me of this episode of The Simpsons where Homer is building his car. He gets a product manager at the car company, and he got this car with all the features. In the end, no one buys it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been the strength of Apple, right? Is to be not the. I mean, they are an innovative company, but they're very rarely the first mover in anything, right? They wait for things to be shaken out, and then they go for something actually usable and perfect it around things there. And I really think there's a value to that. And I just all the time I see like small organizations that we don't need to name going like, oh, I've replaced this tool with something I vibe coded with OpenClaw in 5 minutes, and I'm like, great for you and your 3 buddies. Like, I really don't want my bank being managed by like some random thing that you cooked up in a morning with a tool that I don't trust to calculate the cost of my shopping, like around things like we can do amazing things with these tools now, but like I think there's a layer of moderation needed around what you can actually put in there. Other than using Smaply and journey mapping, favorite tool, tip, practice, method, thing that you bring again and again to teams?
So probably my favorite one is a system map, which is really a simple thing. Like you use a sheet of paper or your whiteboarding tool of choice, draw 3 circles, and then ask yourself, so who are the players? Who's involved? Who's really important for it? The more someone is important for your project, for that experience, the more you put them in the center. The least important they are, you more put them out. And it can be people, stakeholders, but it can be also systems or channels. So that's why we call it system map. So it's really, really broad. I love it because it gives, in no time, so much clarity to a team because they can point towards things and discuss stuff. And I love to do that also, twisting this tool as a research approach. So it's a long time ago, but many years ago, I was invited to a leadership meeting by a large organization. And they started the meeting with like, oh, we invested into becoming user-centric. Now that we can start building great services. So I challenged them and said, let's map out, let's do 3 of those system maps, split up our group. And let's map out the whole sales process, B2B sales, long stuff, and so on. And they started mapping it out. And then we stepped back and said, so let's look at those 3 maps and just ask ourselves, how user-centric are we? So if we are user-centric, the user should be clearly the center of it, right? But in 2 maps, the user wasn't even there. So they started their process with this self-understanding, like, okay, tick the box, we are user-centric. But once they started reflecting on it, they realized, oh, shoot, okay, maybe we are not user-centric. Maybe we talk about being user-centric, but actually we don't practice it yet. And for me, that's one of the greatest tools as a conversation starter or in research, understand who should we talk to and so on.
Awesome. And last one from me. Someone who can remain nameless has admitted to being guilty of saying "make it pretty" regularly to their design team on multiple things. Like, how do you respond to someone who gives that as the direction to to your normally service designers, like people who have very broad ranging decades of experience? Like, how do you respond to make it pretty?
Well, if there's a correlation between pretty and driving sales, fair enough. But what I see rather is make it valuable, make it workable. Because honestly, most services out there fail not because they're not pretty, but because they don't work. And design is about how things work. And we first need to make sure it works. And then once it's working, then we can sprinkle some pretty magic on top.
This is why people are out there making ugly babies.
What a final sentence for this episode.
Mark, it's been brilliant. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, real
Okay,
pleasure.
so-
Appreciate it.
Now's when we wrap, and then normally someone delivers like an amazing truth bomb as the next sentence. We need to get Loki back to do the quick fire questions to Mark as well.
He's banging on my door. I'm sure happily.
I like that he's your interior designer though, right? I always think from things. So
He's well, first he made my office very nice, and then when I moved all that stuff out, he got his revenge and just parked it in front of my door so I couldn't leave my office.
what happens when you mistreat your team?
Yeah.
Okay. Design guilty pleasure, like a thing where you're like, oh, I'll just put the nice chrome edges on the button.
Yes, all my presentations and my books are black and yellow because these are the colors of my favorite football team, Borussia Dortmund.
Oh, I love it. So if people come to your company, yes, as long as it's black and yellow. You're like the Henry Ford of service design.
Take care. Have a good one.
Awesome. Thanks
Thanks, Mark. Bye.